Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in. Very happy that you are here. So, we will be getting started right at 12 noon. Carol, it's good to see you uh, here again. I recognize a couple of the names. Thank y'all for always for your continual joining and taking advantage of these trainings. I'm glad that it's resonating with you, and I'm very happy that to see so many people on. So we're going to be talking about a party with a purpose today. So I'm really excited about that. If you could, as I get set up, if you can kind of in the chat, just kind of put where you're from. That way we can all kind of know where each other's from. I am from South Texas, by the way. I live in Edinburgh, Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, which a lot of people don't know where the Rio Grande Valley is. Lori's from Minnesota. So welcome, Lori. So we have people from all over the place. We have someone from Canada. Lynn is from, and Colorado, and Canada again, I believe. Ashley, is that correct? Yay! So I'm just so excited. I live 20 miles from the Mexico border. So we have someone from Lori from New Jersey, Chicago. So I am just so happy to see everybody here. I am going to start with the process of sharing the screen just to make sure that when I am recording, that I record the right screen. I have a huge problem in always recording the wrong screen. So Ohio is in the house. So I am going to share my screen, and if you can tell me if you see just a regular PowerPoint, that would be greatly appreciated. So is everybody seeing a regular PowerPoint? Let me check in the comments here, because I always yes, 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 yes. So that is good, because it's horrible when you record and it's the wrong screen. So and I don't like to do that. So and I've done it before. That's why I say I've done it before. So let's get started here. I like to give people like a couple of minutes to get on, but I do like to be respectful of the people that show up on time. So it's always a little bit of a conflict for me. Do I start right at 12, or do I start at 12:01, 12:02? So we got about one more minute. I'm going to put this on from the current slide, and I've done it from the current slide. Now that I've hit that button, I still just want to make sure you're seeing just the PowerPoint. So if you could put in the chat for me if you're seeing just the PowerPoint and not the PowerPoint with the black screen, that will help me. See here. Yes, with the slide on the left. So I'm going to change this and see just for giggles, um, and see what you see now. Do you see just one slide or two slides? Better before? Okay, so let's go back to the display and swap it out. Okay, perfect. Now I think we're on track. We should be good. So I am very excited about today's topic, because today's topic is a party with a purpose. We all love a good party, but this is a party with a purpose, and it's a cultivation tool to find new donors. So donor cultivation is the most unappreciated and misunderstood part of the fundraising funnel. As we get into this, we're going to be talking about an actual formula in the fundraising process that I really want to spend some time on. And believe it or not, cultivation is one of the biggest pieces of that funnel. And so I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. And there is a difference between cultivation and, of course, stewardship. So out of all of the events your nonprofit may have on its annual fundraising calendar, donor cultivation events is one of the most important. Um, as we say, donors don't grow on trees. So you have to actually do these events in order to get donors to learn about your organization. And when I'm talking about donor cultivation events, I'm really talking about how are you getting to know your donor? How are you discovering about them? How are you introducing them to your organization? Because you can't make cold ask. That is going to be one of the huge things that actually is not going to benefit you when it comes to fundraising. You have to do these donor cultivation events. You just can't go from, oh, you know what? I know Sally and I think Sally has some money. So we're going to ask Sally for money. And you haven't talked to Sally. You don't know what motivates Sally. Sally don't know anything about your organization. And so all of that part in the middle between finding out who Sally is to asking Sally is donor cultivation. And so it is important that we start the donor cultivation now in advance of the giving season. So don't wait. You got to get your donors primed to give. And a house party is an easy and simple way to do that. And this is what I say, here's a part of that formula. 60% of the fundraising process is cultivating. 60%. That is the largest percent in the fundraising process. A lot of people go to fundraising and they immediately think of making the ask, but making the ask is only 5%. 60% of fundraising funnel is cultivating. So it's very important that we get cultivation right. And so with that in mind, I've used this approach for over 15 years as the CEO of a nonprofit organization. I increased my annual operating budget from $750,000 to $2.5 million and completed a $12 million comprehensive capital campaign. I started and grew an endowment to $500,000, and I had 180 days of cash reserve. And my organization was located along the Mexico-Texas border in the third poorest county in the United States. So having said all of that, it doesn't matter your location. It doesn't matter if you're urban, rural, somewhere in between, suburban, this will work for you. Again, 60% of the fundraising process is cultivation. And so knowing what to do during those cultivation times is going to be critical and it's going to be important. So today, you're going to leave this webinar knowing 7 tips on hosting a friend raising event, how donor cultivation events are the gateway to individual giving, how to identify your next donors, and how to engage your board and top donors in fundraising. I'm excited to talk about that because this is one of the easiest things that your board members and your top donors can get involved in as far as the fundraising funnel is what we're going to refer to it as. So you're in the right place. This training is perfect for you if you want to get your board members and top donors to help with fundraising. You want to grow your new donor pipeline, and you want to learn how to cultivate donors in time for the giving season. Now, I keep saying the giving season, and I don't want to make the assumption that everybody knows when the giving season is. So the giving season is going to be, right around that Thanksgiving, Christmas time. So now is the time to start planning for that giving season. You can tie it in with Giving Tuesday. You can tie it in with your Christmas mail out. You can tie it in with a lot of things. But what you have to do before you can tie anything is you need to have some donors that you have cultivated, because you don't want it to be a cold cultivation, right? So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it really clear, that you're worth it. I want you to close all your emails, and I just had to close my emails as well. Close the 20 browsers that you have open, close the door, ask the kids not to kill themselves or each other for the next hour if they are home. Some kids are still in school, believe it or not, in my area. They're in school to June the 14th, but my granddaughter, which is 2 towns over, she's already out of school and she's already attending the Boys and Girls Club. So maybe you got a break, maybe you don't. Maybe the kids are still at home, maybe they're not at summer camp, but we're just going to ask them not to kill themselves right now. Okay? And before we get started, now that Zoom has let you know, it's a new thing, that this is being recorded. You know that already. If you have any questions, I'm going to ask that you chat them, and I'm going to try to answer the questions at the end in a formal Q&A session. And then, of course, if you're having any internet trouble, check your internet connection, and again, close all your tabs as well. So, who am I? I always start off with if you know who I am, but I am Sabrina Walker Hernandez, and I studied political science and public administration. I obtained a nonprofit management certification from Harvard Business School. And for the last 25 years, I've worked in the nonprofit industry in direct services, operations, and executive leadership. In 2018, I was diagnosed with cancer and felt I needed to retire. Since then, I've been helping small nonprofits, staff, and board build relationships that convert into more donations. Now, everyone always asks me, why do I leave the cancer diagnosis in there? And I tell them it is the whole reason I started my company. So I know what it's like to be overwhelmed, stressed out, and overworked as a nonprofit professional. And so I truly believe, because of the imbalance in my life around running a nonprofit, that the cancers I had, which were 2 blood cancers, were brought on by stress. And I don't want anybody else to go through that. And so I have 25 years worth of experience that is housed in my brain, housed on my computer. And so with that, I like to do a lot of services like these webinars. I have a VIP resource library that is no cost. I see no point in you reinventing the wheel. I am here to service you. I am here to make life a little bit less stressful for you. And so a lot of the things that I provide are at no cost, or if they are, the cost is at a very reasonable cost. So with that, that is who I am. What do? I do workshops, I do board retreats, webinars, coaching, and consulting. And so I'm using everything I learned to get you there faster. That's why it gives me such joy when I see repeat people coming onto the webinars, because if you can just focus on a couple of things that we talk about throughout this, then it's going to make a difference. So I want you to imagine a day when all your fundraising systems are in place and you're raising money even when you're sleeping. Imagine a day when someone comes up to you and says, I love the work that your nonprofit is doing. I'd like to write you a check right now. Imagine a day when fundraising has become easy and fun, and you always have enough to fund your mission. The one thing that I know, it all starts with friend raising. And so for some of you, friend raising, this might be the first time you've heard that term, or you've gone down I call it uh, the Google rabbit hole, and you've come across the term friend raising, but you just wasn't sure what it was. So let's talk about friend raising. So friend raising, it's all about, crafting a donor-centered journey that really predisposes donors to want to give to you and keep giving to you, as opposed to a one-time or token gift. Friend raising allows you to start the donor relationship with a real human connection. And if one of the things that the pandemic has taught us, it is We hope that your nonprofit had good friends, because friends will continue to give even in a crisis. That's what we count on those friendships for. We do not want that one time token gift where, you know what, I'm doing this because I just want you to stop asking me. And that's it. You want a gift that's built on a relationship, so that if something like a pandemic comes along, or you have an emergency funding situation, that you know you can count on your friends, to provide the support that you need. So friend raising is very critical. You need to have friends in this nonprofit industry. And how you can start this friend raising process, of course, is a party with a purpose. And a party with a purpose is a small, informal gathering to expose prospective supporters to your nonprofit and its mission. One of the mistakes that I made when I first started doing party with a purpose, or I call them house parties, is I thought it was really about quantity of people there, and it's not about the quantity of people. It really is a small gathering. So 10 to 20 people at the most would be the perfect size for a house party. I sometimes overachieve, and I try to, you know, oh, we need 40 people there, or 60 people look like success in my head. That's what it was, but it's not. Success is 10 to 20 people at your event. The smaller, the more intimate, the actual better the event is going to be for you. And so another critical ingredient of a party with a purpose is your resource development strategy. Knowing what you're trying to do, knowing how many people you're trying to get into your donor pipeline. What is your goal around that? And having some idea as you go into this. What is the purpose of this house party? And then it's also an informal event that will expand your donor base, improve your donor relations, and augment long-term donor loyalty. And so there is a purpose for these house parties. It's not just a party, right? Although I love myself a good party, it is a party with a purpose, and you have to keep in mind the purpose of that party. So as we talk about the purpose of the party, remember that this one is meant to be simple, actually simple to plan and simple to implement. And again, small, informal, in an intimate setting. And you have to remember that this may be the first introduction the guests have to your nonprofit. And so the information that you present is going to, and how you present it is going to be critical. And it's a way to connect with new people. It's an opportunity to initiate, cultivate, and strengthen friendships. And when we talk about strengthening friendships, it will be a good opportunity if you have a list of donors that has lapsed, that maybe gave like last year or a couple of years ago, but they haven't given recently. They will be great, even though they're not a new donor, they will be great to add to a list of invitees, because they're what you consider a lapsed donor. And so you need to remind them why they gave to your organization to begin with, and also how it could benefit them to continue to give to your organization. Um, a house party or party with a purpose is going to help you identify prospects. And more importantly, it's a friend raising event, not a fundraising event. Now, some people, that is Sabrina's opinion. That's not an opinion. It is a friend raising event. But there are some people who's like, I have them in the room. So if I have them in the room, I'm going to go ahead and ask for money. That is something that you need to determine based on your audience. But I always go into these house parties as a friend raising event, as a cultivation, because I do not make cold ask. So again, remember, if this is their first time being introduced to your organization and you're getting them in a small, intimate gathering, and then you're asking them for money, I don't agree with that, but again, that's just an opinion. There are some who do these house parties and they make it a fundraising event during that small intimate gathering. I like to make it, for me, it's a cultivation event where you get to introduce them to your nonprofit. You get to not only introduce them to your nonprofit, but discover a little bit more about them. Because remember, the ultimate goal is not a token one-time gift. So you have to think about that when you're deciding your purpose. For me, again, it's a friend raising because I'm kicking off a relationship. I do not want a one-time token gift because whoever the host was asked me to be there, and I'm there because of the host, and now I'm gonna because of the host, I am going to donate money. That has nothing to do with your organization. I want a friend to my organization. So I am going to use this house party as a way to start building that relationship. So keep that in mind when you're determining your purpose for a house party. Again, for me, we used them and very successfully as a friend raising event. It was one of the best friend raising cultivating events that we did, very much low pressure in planning and implementation. So here is what I like to spend a little time focused on, because this is how you're going to fund your nonprofit. I like to focus on this because a lot of people, when you start talking about fundraising and the fundraising funnel or the fundraising process, they immediately go to making the fundraising ask. That includes you as the nonprofit leader. It includes any board members. That 5%, and I'll go through each one, that 5% scares the heck out of people. And people will freeze up all because of that 5%, which is the ask. So I like to explain that fundraising is so much more than asking. So let's go over this really quick. I really want to spend some time talking about this because this helps people kind of woosah, okay? So stage one is identifying. And what does that mean? You're going to identify your prospects. You're going to have a list of names. Here are some people that we have identified that we think might be very supportive of our organization. And then 10% is qualifying. Now, are they supportive of our organization? Yes. Do they have the ability to give? That's how you're going to qualify them. And depending on what amount that is that you're seeking, will determine if they qualify. So you're gonna 20% of the fundraising process is identifying and qualifying your donor. So Sabrina's name's on the list. Great. Is Sabrina passionate about animals? Maybe. Is Sabrina passionate about children? Definitely. Am I a children organization? Yes, I am. So, yay, I think Sabrina would be a great fit for my organization. Now, does Sabrina have the ability to give? That's where you sit in it depends on how you want to do that. You can sit in a room with your board and say, you know what, I know Sabrina, and yes, I know that she's given to other organizations because she serves on several boards with me, or I know Sabrina because she's involved in the community. Or you can say, I know, you can do a wealth screening. Now, a wealth screening is, of course, is going to cost you money. I have invested in a wealth screening. It was one of the best investments that I made. It was about $2,000. And what you do is you send in a list of all your donors or potential donors with their name and their address. And it's, I think they ask a couple other questions. Probably name and address is really all you need. And depending on the wealth screening system that you use, then they will kick back to you information on that donor, and they get information that is of public record. They look at public property. They look at new all kinds of things. And so one of the things that really helped me with the wealth screening, which I thought was really, well worth the $2,000 investment, was the wealth screening that you use. And don't quote me right now because I don't remember, that we use really divided people up into like A, B, C, and D. And A's were like people who were worth $1 million or more. And then you had someone that was worth $250,000 or more, half a million, so forth and so on. And in our county, which remember is the third poorest county in the United States, we had an A person, someone that was worth millions of dollars. Would have never known that without the wealth screening. And immediately, what do you think we started doing? We started cultivating and identifying, identify the person, and we started qualifying the person to see if they were interested in us, and do all of that. And I can tell you, based on that, that person wrote us $100,000 check for our capital campaign, and they continue to give every year at $10,000. But I would not have known that without the wealth screening information. So in stage two, to qualify the donors, that's what you need to do. You need to decide if you're going to do a wealth screening. And if not, it's okay. If you don't have that $2,000 to invest, it's perfectly okay. You can do an informal qualification simply by getting your board members in a room and saying, okay, who knows who? What do you know about this person? Looking at the newspaper. I know people think newspapers are out of date, but looking at the newspaper, if they're coming out in the newspaper because they're involved in this charity or that charity, that is still good information to have because you know that they're active. The other thing that I would do is I would always collect other nonprofits, sponsor not sponsor packets, but thank yous, because the nonprofits still do the thank you ads in the newspaper after their events, right? Because they want their sponsors to have that recognition and see that value. And so I would go through the newspapers and also any magazines and look at the thank you ads for the sponsors, and I would look and see what names were on there and what businesses was up there, because if they're giving to that nonprofit organization, then that means they have the ability to give to others. And so those are kind of the little tricks that you would do in the qualifying process. And then Stage three is cultivation, which we're talking about today. And that is building the relationship. That is 60% of the fundraising process. So if you take the 10% for identifying, the 10% for qualifying, and the 60% for cultivating, we're already at 80% of fundraising. And we haven't talked about asking for money. Asking for money is only 5% of the fundraising process. And people will not serve on boards. People get all nervousy. People will, procrastinate about making the ask, all because of 5%. And I don't want you to lose good board members. I don't want you to psych yourself out all because of 5%. It's a very small percentage. The ask is very small. And if you're doing cultivation right, then you already know these people. And so the asks should come really fluid to you because you've built a relationship with them, and they know you're coming. I think someone asked in the last webinar, like, how do you build an authentic relationship if they know you're going to be asking for money? And I say that ship has sailed. As soon as you said nonprofit, they knew what it was about, right? They know that you are trying to get money for your mission. What you're trying to do is just make sure that the mission, what they want to fund, is aligned with what they are passionate about. And so, for example, again, I worked with the Boys and Girls Club, many programs, but we had programs around literacy. We had programs around drug prevention. We had programs around child safety, all kinds of programs, right? But what in the cultivation process, I had to figure out which of those programs really aligned with my donor's passion. Because there was no point for me to go in and talk about child safety if they were passionate about literacy. And so that cultivation process is key when it comes to getting to know them, so you can go in and make the ask. Because when I go in and make the ask, I want to ask them to support my literacy program. I don't want to ask them to support, my child safety program or some drug prevention program. I want to make sure I know the donor so well that I'm asking them to support what they are passionate about, so that their yes comes very easy and very fluid. And even if they say no, I understand that they're saying no, not this opportunity. No, not until I talk to my spouse. No, not until I get more information. But it's not a no forever, right? So understand that. Don't get discouraged by that 5%. And then ultimately, stage 5 is saying thank you, which is 15%. So recognizing the donor, saying thank you to the donor, making sure that they understand the impact of their program, the impact of their funding, that's 15%. So that's 100% right there. But the ask again was only 5%. And so I don't want y'all to get discouraged by that 5%. And I do like to take some time always to go through that, because I think that makes people feel better about saying, my board members don't do anything, or saying, or in the case of getting nervous about that 5%. Don't let that 5%, don't get hung up on that 5%. So we're here to talk about the 60%. So in talking about the 60% and talking about a house party or friend raising, the first thing that you have to do is you have to consider where you're going to hold your event. So that's the first thing that you have to do. So again, it's called a house party, and just by the name, you want to make sure you're holding it in a home, right? So again, remember they're intended to be more intimate in nature. So this is how you can get your board members involved. If you're, you can ask your board member or a top donor to host a house party in their home. They're not asking for money. What they're doing is inviting 10 of their friends, and they're going to host this event in their home. And it's only going to be a couple of hours. There's an advantage of having board members and donors hosted in their home. It's because usually, traditionally, whoever hosts it will cover the cost of the food and the beverage for the party. Another option that you can do, a little bit thinking outside of the box, is you can do a Airbnb. If you like, what, my board members don't have the home that they feel comfortable doing this, or my donor has said no, you can, if you still want to hold it in a home, an Airbnb would be a great option. Also, you can do it in a donor's or board member's place of business, or you can do it at your nonprofit office. However, I will say it is best to do it in a home. I have done them in places of business. It doesn't lend that air of intimacy or being on the inside of the nonprofit or being special to that nonprofit. So I have done them in both, and that is my takeaway of doing them in a business. The preference should be in a home. It just lends to being a part of a special and select group of people who have been invited into this home. So the other thing that I would say, as far as board members and getting them comfortable with a house party, one of the things that we did with our board, which really helped them, is our board member actually held a house party in their home for our board. So we had a board member that opened up her home, and then she held a house party for other board members. So remember, I had between 17 and 21 board members. And so people couldn't, oftentimes to get people over their fear, or I'm a visual learner, so this was really good for me, is to do, it's more like a practice run, right? And so the board member held it in their home, and we actually went through the whole process with other board members. And it actually worked for them so that they could see how it was going to be, see what we were talking about. And it was a cultivating event also for the board members. We actually went through the whole house party schedule. We treated them as if they were the invited intimate guest, and it really worked as far as a visual. The other thing that you will find out as you get to learn your donors, and hopefully you have some top donors. We had a top donor that she loved to give parties. That was her thing. And so as long as it was throwing a party, she was going to say yes. And so she opened up her home, beautiful home, poolside, infinity pool, twice a year to us for these house parties and for donor appreciation. But that was her contribution to us, was to open up her home and to pay for these events. And so you might have those donors who may they're a top donor because of in kind and not necessarily because of monetary. But her in kind was opening up her home and doing these events for us twice a year. And people looked forward to having invite to her home and being able to come into her home. Was almost like exclusive, very much an oasis, and people looked forward to coming in and learning a little bit and kind of exploring her home and seeing her home. And so keep that in mind as you're discovering who your donors are. There might be some who really like to give parties, and that could be their contribution to your organization. And so once you determine where your event is going to be held, you also need to kind of think about, is it going to have a theme? Is it going to be wine tasting and dinner? Is it going to be a pool party? Is it going to be a reception with nonprofit clients? Is it going to be coffee and dessert? Are you going to have a post-board meeting reception? Is it going to be considered like an after hours office party? Will you tie it in with the holidays? If you do it at your nonprofit, will it be as a part of an open house? Could you do it in a restaurant, at the host's favorite restaurant? Will it be virtual? Because you can do these house parties virtual. And I've had many people, many clients who have done these virtual, and they have worked out very well. And so kind of keep those things in mind. What will be the format? What are some of the ideas around this? And then once you've determined that, next thing you have to worry about is timeline and budget, right? So again, I keep repeating small and intimate in nature, because that's what they are. That is the secret of the house party. No more than 10 to 20 people. And so because it's small and intimate, you really don't need a lot of time, planning time. You need about 1 to 3 months to plan, depending on if you have a list of potential people who are already have beautiful homes and willing to open up your home. That can even cut the planning time in half. So that's why it's like a 1 to 3 month planning time. You're going to need a budget for the house party. Again, usually it's the host that covers the cost of the house party. But when you ask people, you need to let them know that. And that's why you tell them, the menu should be something small. It should be something light, and you should have some wine and some water, just depending on what theme they choose to have. Again, the host usually covers the costs. And if that's not the case, the budget is going to guide the size of your event. And one of the alternative ways to fund or to cover the costs is consider having your board members split the cost of the food and the beverage menu if the house party is not budgeted and if the host cannot cover that cost. I have not had a host who said that they cannot cover the cost. The only time that I had a host that said that they could not cover the cost was when we actually did it in someone's business. And that's why I don't particularly like doing them in businesses. Again, I think if someone invites you, agrees to do something in their home, it's a natural assumption that they will cover the cost. And that's why I love doing these in people's home. And you, again, when you do it in people's home, you're creating a special environment. People really feel special because you have invited them into a home. And so keep that in mind. And then once you've determined the theme, you know where you're going to hold it at, you have your planning timeline, you have your budget, you need to determine who to invite. So the beauty of a house party is that the board or the donor who's hosting invite their friends. And they're going to invite the friends who they think want to learn more about the nonprofit. So that guest list is solely up to the host. Now, you might have to help the host brainstorm, but it really is up to the host. So this is going to open it up to a different circle or sphere of influence, because it's the host that is going to come up with the potential donor pool, right? And they're going to be the one that is going to invite the people to their home. And so these are people that you may not have a connection with, and that is what you want. You want a new donor pipeline, right? And so it really is important to kind of let the host know that. So even if your event is not hosted in a house, your board member or your donor can still take on the responsibility of the guest list. So, because you want to ensure that this is a list of their peers. You want it, especially if it's a donor. If it's a donor, you want the guests to be their peers, because you already know that they have the ability to give to your organization. And so their friends are going to be friends that have the ability to give to your organization. Same can be said of board members. So even if it's not hosted in a home, you still want them to come up with a guest list. So that's going to be critical. Okay. So what makes a good prospect to invite? So what's going to make a good prospect to invite is, and helping your host come up with some names is, you're going to brainstorm some potential invitees to the party. You're going to be sure that they are good long-term prospective donors. Again, these are people that you have identified and you have qualified. And that's because they share these three characteristics. Again, linkage to the organization or to the mission of the organization, not necessarily the organization. They have the ability to give and they have the interest to give. That is the 20% right there. That identifying and qualifying. And so this is where you really focus in on that 20%. Do they have an interest in our mission? Do they have a linkage to our mission? And do they have the ability to give? Those are the people that you want on that list to be invited. And with that in mind, again, I say, I'm going to provide some bonus material for you just for attending live. I'm going to give you a list generator for event invitees and the sphere of influence worksheet, because I too serve on a board. And I have sat in the room, and believe it or not, guys, even though I do this for a living and have done it for over 20 years, I sat in a board meeting probably a couple months ago because we're doing one of our first events. And they were like, okay, who can we invite to this event, or who do we know? And my mind went completely blank. I did the typical board member thing. I was like, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody that might be interested in this event, or I don't know. Let me think about it. And I couldn't believe it. And so this list generator is for people like me that just needs a clue. Give me some categories. If you give me some categories, I can write some names down under that category, and that'll start my mind flowing. And so make sure you do this with whoever you have host, or with your board in general. It is not intentionally. I can say that from a board member's point of view. It is just something that kind of happens to your brain when somebody puts you on the spot like that, and you start kind of going through that process. And I was very surprised that it happened to me. So yes, somebody, I will say that you can do house parties during COVID. You can do them virtually. I have worked with a number of my clients and done some virtual house parties. So it is something that easily translates over to the virtual world. And we're going to get into that just a little bit more on how you can do this virtually. So now that you've kind of know exactly what where it's going to be held at, whether it's in someone's home or virtual. I do not want to lose that piece of the virtual, because this is something that very easily can translate into virtual. You know kind of the theme, you know who's going to host it. You've planned it out. You've had your 1 to 3 month planning window if you need that much time. Now the party is on. So when the party is on, and what it's going to look like is your host is prepared. Um, at the party, you're going to make sure you show your nonprofit is making a difference in the client's life. You're going to make sure you have information that is compelling and meaningful and concise. And you're going to make sure that it's enjoyable and it's a memorable party, even if you're doing it online. So, and we're going to talk about the virtual right now. If this is being done in person, so what does it look like when it's been done in person? When it's in person, it's 1 to 2 hours in length. I would lean towards the 2 hours, because if you're inviting people, I don't want to show up for an hour. Well, culturally, where I live, you tell people 6 o'clock, they might show up at 6:30. If the event is 1 hour, then you've lost some time there. So it's great to have like a 2-hour window. And then you have 15 minutes of formal presentation with only about 5 minutes of Q&A. You're going to make sure that everybody receives a party favor, and you say thank you. That's going to take about 10 minutes. And then you just focus on food, fellowship, and fun. It really is an informal, where your board members are there, where if you have staff, they're there, and you're mingling and you're answering questions about the organization as you're mingling. So again, 2 hours in length is the best time. You're going to have 15 minutes of formal presentation. What does that 15 minutes of formal presentation look like? It is your CEO, your board doing a welcome, your CEO saying a little bit about the organization, and having a client come up and tell their story. The client story is key. You're going to have 5 minutes of Q&A where anybody can ask a question right after the client presentation. You're going to make sure that you do the thank you, right? And then it's all mingling from there. When it is virtual, what we have learned, 30 minutes tops. Do not go more than 30 minutes when you're doing a virtual house party. The same principles stand when you're doing a virtual house party. You still get your board member or a donor to host. They still invite their friends. You still go through that same process, but it's a 30-minute presentation. And that 30 minutes, again, is welcome by the board member, some information from the CEO, and you have a client tell the story. Hopefully with both the in-person and the virtual, if you can have a client there live, even better. If you can't, a video. And I've done it both ways, with a video and without a video. It has not diminished. It has not diminished the actual house party. So if I could ask everybody to go on to mute, that would be great. It has not diminished the actual house party. So with that in mind, what do you have to do? Again, just to recap it for you, you're going to have a board member host, or you're going to get a donor to host. They're going to invite their friends. You have to prepare them with instructions, and then you have to conduct the event, and you have to follow up with the guest. Follow up is going to be key. That's what the board member or the host is going to do. It's going to be key to make sure that people understand that 15% of recognition, that 15% of saying thank you. And not only is the host going to follow up, but also the staff. So the staff, their role is they're going to prepare the host. They're going to assist as needed at the actual event, or whether it's virtual. They're going to follow the directions, and they're going to facilitate follow up with the guests so that everybody kind of knows their role. So number 4, and you have to include a component of networking where board members and staff can interact with the donors. So remember I said all that time it's 2 hours, but you're going to do mingling. Mingling is actually key to a house party. So it starts with an informal welcome by the host, explaining their connection to the organization and why the guests have been invited. And you're going to create time and space for networking, where the board members and the staff, they're serving as greeters so they can welcome the donors to the event. They're mingling, they're dropping in key information about the organization. Board members at that time can be serving as ambassadors, sharing why they're involved with the organization and what the organization means to them. And so this is also a great time for your board members to actually serve as ambassadors and advocates. And so again, you're going to have an established program, and we kind of talked about that. You're going to have some allotted time for the ED to talk. You're going to have a lot of time for the board member to say they're welcome, a lot of time for the host to say what they have to say. And then again, you're going to make sure that the mission and the impact is woven throughout the event. So it's not a formal, let me tell you what my organization does. It's very informal, and it's a part of the mingling. And so that is key. And then one of the most important parts, again, is the testimonial. Like I said, if you can have someone there, great. That's always great because you have a live person there. If you can't have someone there, then do a video. But what you cannot do is you cannot skip this part, because that is where you're going to get the emotional connection with the donor. They want to hear from the client. They want to know firsthand about the impact. And so your video or your client testimonial needs to have some emotion behind it, because that's where you're going to connect that potential donor. And so who you have do the testimonial, or who you have do the video, is going to be key. And it doesn't have to be, it could be video with your phone. Don't get all complicated. Don't be like, well, we can't do this because we don't have a video. You can do a video with your phone. That is not the point. The point is, it just needs to be an emotional connection with the donor. That's what you're trying to establish. So putting a little time into that testimonial is going to be key. That is one of the key ingredients. And then finally, the final ingredient is that 15% of the fundraising process. Remember, we talked about is the thank you. You have to make sure that you say thank you. And not only that you say thank you, that you have a sign-in sheet where you capture the donor's information, the potential donor's information, because this is going to set up the stage for post-event follow-up. And post-event follow-up is where you start to really nurture the relationship. So on the parting words of the host should be, thank y'all for attending. Don't forget to make sure that you have signed up on the sign-in sheet so that we will be able to get in contact with you. Make sure you include your email, because we want to add you to our email list, and things of that nature. So Follow up, follow up, follow up is very critical. You're going to send a personal thank you note after the party. You're going to send information guests requested, because if they put down that they wanted more information on something, make sure you do it in a timely manner. You're going to put them on your newsletter list and or your annual report, and you're going to schedule requested tours. If you are facility based and someone said, you know what, I want a tour of your organization, you're going to make sure that they get a tour of your organization. But again, follow up, follow up, follow up. You're going to follow up the guests. You're going to thank them for attending. You're going to ask if they have a minute, call them up, ask if they have a minute to talk about the event. And then you're going to dive in and you're going to gauge how they felt about the event, what was most impactful about the event, and ask them for any suggestions that they may have. Ask them if you hosted another event, is there anyone that they would consider inviting? And you're gonna, follow up by asking if they're interested in getting involved with your organization and what capacity, because their answer is going to set the stage for the communication that you have with them going forward, and hopefully it's going to turn into a long-lasting donor relationship. So I am going to repeat this: follow up, follow up, follow up. The ideal end game for a house party attendees is to become major gift donors. But the house party cultivation event is the first step to getting to that sweet spot. So I want you to know that according to research, 67% of those who responded said attending a donor cultivation event, uh, they credited attending a donor cultivation event as the reason why they made their gift. So donor cultivation events are no doubt the gateway to individual giving. So if you're looking to expand your donors, if you're looking to open up the doors to major gifts and individual gifts, this is going to be the way to go. And one of the documents that I am going to give you is going to be a 5x5 cultivation plan. And basically what that is it's going to tell you, you know what, here is Sabrina, and I'm going to invite her in for a tour. I'm going to make a phone call with her. I'm going to take her out to lunch. I'm going to, ensure that she is invited to this special event. It is actually a cultivation plan that you can do with these donors. That's 60%. How am I going to spend 60% of my time in fundraising with this person to develop this relationship? And so with that, I hope that you feel a little bit more comfortable about what a friend raising event is, what a party with a purpose is, what a house party is. All of those things are interchangeable. So, you know, I hope that it has resonated with you. What I have shared with you is 7 tips on hosting a friend raising event. I hope you understand an understanding of how donor cultivation events are the gateway to individual giving, how to identify your next donors, and how to engage your board and top donors in fundraising. At this point, you have 2 choices. You can continue to Google it, and that's what I always say. Go down the rabbit hole, that's your choice, or you can fast track it to results, to cultivating new donors. And I want to help you. As you can see, hosting a house party is different from any other fundraising event. It can be a little bit of a mystery, and what happens to them, what should be included, what's the most important information to relay. What you need to be successful is you need instructions, you need invitations, you need a timeline, you need an agenda, you need a script, you need a guest list, and you need thank you notes. And so I have created the friend raising house party event kit, and it is perfect for you if you feel like, you're what you're doing is not working and change is needed. If you're wearing too many hats and you're putting out fires and you don't have time for fundraising and building relationships, if you want your board to get more involved in fundraising, or if you just don't know where to start. So why am I doing it? again, you guys, you know, if you've been to my trainings, you know that I'm passionate and mission driven to help nonprofit professionals like you. I also know how I've been able to help others like you who are struggling with their board and fundraising, and I can help you with friend raising event to start cultivating donors. And so you can get access to the house party friend raising kit in person and virtual by going to this site, and the cost is only $37. Now, someone asked me about virtual. Davita is one of the people that I worked with, and her organization, she's stateside, and her organization is actually in Africa. And so she used the friend raising kit, and they had their first fundraiser after I introduced them to the idea, and they do it for 30 minutes via Zoom, and they called them Vision View, and they've had great response, and they're planning on doing them monthly. And so they do work if you're doing them virtually. You just have to be very respectful of people's time. Marseille has used them. She is a STEM organization, and she's used them with her corporate clients as well. And so it has worked out well for her. And so at this point, I am going to stop the share, and I am going to answer any questions that I saw come up in the chat to make sure, and then I'm going to drop all the links that we've done. So okay, so someone said, Francisca said, if we are doing these parties in someone's home, how do we start talking about the organization? Where there is a very clear script on how you talk about the organization. Again, just to kind of give you an informal overlay, the host does a welcome to his home. He says why he's involved in the organization, and then the board member does a welcome. The CEO comes in and talks about the organization, and then you cap it off with a client story, and then it's mingling from there. So we Leslie said we had the host introduce us and tell us why they're involved, and then we did a presentation. That's exactly what, yeah, Leslie, good job. And then we said, someone said house party during COVID. My organization is located in Canada, and things are opening up slower. And yes, so you can do them during COVID virtually. And then we have someone that's planning a hybrid party where volunteers are hosting small groups or pods at their home on the same day, and we'll be connecting virtually to each party to do my presentation. That is an awesome idea. I would love to have more information on that, Miss Diaz. So let's see. Does anybody have any questions at this time that may not have gotten answered? If not, I am going to drop all the documents that I promised you at this time. And as I always say, give me space and grace, because I get nervous. I don't know why I get nervous when I start sharing and going and look. I think I tricked myself this time around. I actually have, I think what I'm going to do this time, since we've had some trouble with the files, I am going to share a Google document link, which I hope will be better for you guys. I guess I'll share the file and the Google document link. So this is for the sphere of influence. That is the Google document link for the sphere of influence. And then this is going to be for the 5x5 cultivation plan here. The next link is for the 5x5 cultivation plan. And then the next link is going to be for the list generator, which actually is my preference. I love myself a good list generator because it gives you categories of people and you don't have to think. And then I am going to share the link for the house party kit if you're interested in purchasing that. And I am going to actually upload the files so you can grab them here as well. So you have two ways of getting to those files. Space and grace is what I asked for. Space and grace. Let's see. Okay, and so we're going to go into, um, here we go. Let's get you these documents. So in case you don't want to Google, you don't have to. You don't have to download. So here we go. There's one. That's the 5x5 donor cultivation as a document. And here is what I do ask that would be lovely. If you actually are going to do a house party or you do any of the things that I have suggested throughout these webinars, I love the feedback on if it's working for you or not. I love when people say, "Oh my God, I tried it and it worked." That those give my heart warm and fuzzies. So I invite you to give my heart warm and fuzzies. So now you have the donor cultivation PDF, you have the list generator PDF, and you have the sphere of influence PDF, as well as the link to the Google Docs in case the file doesn't work for you. So I'm just going to leave this up here for a few more seconds so that you can access them. And with that, I think that is it. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone who made the time to attend this webinar. Again, I try to be respectful of your time. So with that, I am going to be departing. Thank y'all so very much. I look forward to seeing y'all at least once a month. If you haven't joined my nonprofit group, feel free to do so on Facebook. It's Nonprofit Professionals Exchange. Y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.